Okay, turning left from a side road into a main road, which is known as a minor to a major turn. And we're going to look at turning left to start with. So on the approach to the T-junction, the examiner or the instructor will tell you to turn left at the end of the road. And the instruction you're going to get is, at the end of the road, turn left. The first thing you want to do is carry out an observation by taking a right mirror check. It may be necessary to take a left mirror check as well, and that would be if the road was quite wide, or if you're in a left-hand corner, you'd check your left mirror to see what was going on behind you. And this way you would be checking what the traffic situation is and how close the vehicles are behind, and also if there's any vehicles overtaking, at this time they wouldn't know where you were going, so you would take a mirror check here to ensure that you knew or not if they were overtaking. At this stage, if there was a vehicle overtaking you, what you may do is delay the signal, or you could take an observation over the shoulder to warn them off or to have a look at what they're actually doing. The next thing to do then is pop the indicator on to the left, and if you were turning right you would indicate right, but this time we're turning left, so we pop the left indicator on to tell people behind us where we intend to turn. Once the indicator's flashing, we can take a mirror check or a lifesaver over the left shoulder and then move the bike over, and we'll manoeuvre over into position. Once you're in position, the next thing to do is start the slowing down process. So as we come down in our speed, we need to turn the power off, apply the front brake gently to get the rear light shining straight away, and then bring in a little bit of rear brake. What happens there is the bike is nice and stable, and as we're slowing down, the bike will dip forward onto the front as we start the slowing down process. We use the rear brake as well to settle the bike down so it's nice and even. And then as the bike's slowing down on the brakes, we also use the gears to help to slow the machine down. And we're going to use a little bit of engine braking. I'll discuss that in a second. So we start the front brake and the rear brake as we start to come into the junction. On the approach in this area, and it would be anywhere between here and here, we're going to be using our gears to help slow the bike down. So this is how it's going to work. As we do a gear change, we release the clutch, and we should feel the bike slow down as we release the clutch. So I'm going to turn the power off, front brake, rear brake, and as the bike slows down, clutch in, down the gear, clutch out slowly. If the bike doesn't slow down as I release the clutch, then the gear is too high for the speed of the bike. And what you'll need to do is another gear change. What you are looking for is, as you release the clutch, you feel the bike slowing down on the engine, and that way we've got a combination of brakes and gears slowing the machine down. We go down the gears, and we'll be going down one gear at a time, so as we slow down we'll gear down as well, and then as we get closer to the junction we then need to have a look into the junction, and we're going to look both ways even though we are turning left, because we need to know what's going on in the new lane here. We may have a bus that's stopped and picking up passengers, we may have parked vehicles, or there could be some other kind of danger like people crossing the road. So it's very important to check both ways as we approach. As we come in here, we're going to come off the front brake and just be on the rear brake only, and you can see what I've done is I've followed the curb line around, which will give me a really nice angle to come out of the junction. At this stage, when I've had a look, I need to make a decision, and I need to decide what I'm going to do at this point. If I'm going to stop, I need to be looking forward and concentrate on stopping near the curb and also getting down into first gear. So what I do is I'd make the decision that I'm not going, I look forward, clutch comes in, double tap and finish off on the rear brake only. So once I get close enough, maybe 2-3 car lengths away from the junction, release the front brake, rear brake only for the final approach, and then what we're going to do is make the decision to stop or go. If we do stop, we stop behind the line facing forward. If we decide to go, if we decide that it's clear, then you can just release the brake and then keep the same speed all the way around the junction. So if we've stopped, we need to have another look to the right, ensure that it's safe, and once it's safe we need to look forward and then ride out of the junction nice and slowly, cancel signal and then accelerate away in that position there. If we do decide to go, then what we'll do is the final look would have been a little bit earlier, and then once the decision's made we're going to look where we're going, and then we're going to come out of the junction nice and slowly, cancel signal and then accelerate away. What we'll never do is take another look to the right now to check that it's still safe, because the bike may drift out of position and you could head over towards the centre of the road, and if there was oncoming traffic you may end up having a few difficulties there. One of the things that we need to discuss and be more aware of in the junction is in this area here, it needs to be nice and calm and nice and controlled. We're never going to rush or try and race out of the junction. While you're riding, you're going to come to the end of the road, and the examiner or the instructor would give you an instruction and they would say, at the end of the road, turn right please. And that means you're coming to the end of this road into a T-junction. So, for the right turn then, we do a right mirror check to see what the traffic behind is doing. We may need to do an observation if the traffic was too close, or if you had someone overtaking you, you would take a mirror check and possibly an observation at the same time. When you look forward, you're going to assess how far away the junction is, and if there are any junctions in between you and the end of the road, then we're just going to delay the indicator. So looking here, there's no junction, so we put the right indicator on, and that tells people we intend to turn right at the end of the road. Once the indicator's flashing and we're happy, we're then going to do an observation over the shoulder, which would be known as a lifesaver for the manoeuvre over to the right. And if you weren't going to move that far over, you may do a little mirror check, which would give you enough information just to move the bike over maybe a foot or so. So in this position here, we would carry out a lifesaver and then we'd manoeuvre over into position. Now the manoeuvre is going to be far enough over towards the white line to allow people to know that you are turning right. What you don't want to do though is move that far over, any part of your bike or body is crossing the white line as you approach the end of the road. Once you're in position, what will happen is we're going to start to use the brakes, and we're going to slow the bike down using brakes and gears on approach. Now the way to do that again is to use front brake followed by rear brake. While the bike is slowing down, what we'll do is we would go down through the gears. Again, while we're changing gear, every time you release the clutch, what you need to do is have a little bit of engine braking to slow the bike down on approach. So we use a combination of both. Once we get close to the junction, we're then going to release the front brake and come in here on the rear brake only. The reason we do that is because if I come in on the front brake, the whole of the front end of the bike will be dipping down, and while the front end of the bike's dipping down, the head's going to be down, and also you may be off balance. It may induce a skid if you hit any oil or gravel at the end of the junction as well. So by releasing the front brake, it gives you maximum input on the steering, and also by having the rear brake applied, the front end of the bike will lift slightly as you use the rear brake on approach. Once we're coming in, we're going to have a good look into the junction both ways, and if the junction is clear and we've looked as far back either way into the junction, once we've made the decision that it's clear, we can ride slowly out of the junction, bring the bike into the middle of the new lane, cancel signal and then accelerate away. The other thing that might happen is when we get to here, we decide that the junction isn't clear, so we don't bother looking either side anymore. We just look forward, keep the bike nice and stable, and concentrate on stopping the bike behind the line and also getting the bike into first gear ready to pull away. Once we've stopped, we can look into the junction both ways and we'll check that it's clear. If we stop for any length of time, we need a lifesaver over the right shoulder and basically this just informs us that it's safe and there's nobody trying to overtake us because they're impatient or they want to get going a little bit quicker than us. Once you've taken the lifesaver, final look to the left to ensure that it's clear to the left, final look to the right to ensure it's clear from the right. Keep your head looking in the direction that you intend to travel, and then we're going to ride out of the junction nice and gently into the new lane, cancel signal, and then carry on. Again, what we're not going to do is take another look to the left once we head off, and the reason being the bike might end up going straight towards the curb, and if that was on the test then that would be a steering fault. And the other problem with that is if you do lose control and end up going a little bit too fast, you may hit the curb and that would result in a fail. Once you're in this position here, you can see that we've slightly angled the bike to make it easier to come out of the junction. What I don't want to do is I don't want to stop aiming straight or even aiming slightly left. This would make the turn of the bike really difficult as I come out of the junction. So it's always important to try and aim the bike slightly left or slightly right as you're coming into the junction, and always aim the bike slightly into the direction that you intend to travel to make the junction a lot easier. Okay, we've talked about the left turn minor to major, and now we're going to talk about the left turn major to minor. The sequence is exactly the same, and it would be OSMPSL, observation signal, manoeuvre into position, slow the bike down, and then have a look into the hazard or the junction before you turn in there. This time the instruction is slightly different. The examiner or instructor would say, take the next road on the left. This would indicate to you that the next road on the left is the turn that you need to take. So the approach has been exactly the same. We've done observation signal, we've manoeuvred into position, and now what we're going to do is slow the bike down on approach. As we slow the bike down, again we're just going to bring the speed down, matching the gear to the speed of the bike. As we slow everything down and we've got the correct speed on approach, we're then going to need to use the rear brake only to finish off. Normally there's a lamppost around about here, which is fairly near to the junction. If you use that as a guide, so just after the lamppost, we're going to release the front brake and we should be travelling at around about the correct speed. Then the rear brake then settles the bike down, and then as we're coming in towards the junction, we then need to look into the junction as we come round so that we know what's going on in this area here. If it's all clear, we bring the bike round following the curb, and as we come round we cancel signal, bring the bike round to position, and then once we're straight and heading in the correct direction, then we can accelerate away. The thing that we need to do back here is ensure that when we're looking down into this junction, we're looking for any new speed limits that we might come across as we turn in. And the other thing we're looking for is anything that's in this road, and we may need to move the bike over to the right hand side of the lane to come past anything that was parked here, or if we had oncoming traffic the other way that was going past maybe a cyclist, it might be that the vehicle is actually over our line. Then what we would need to do is bring the bike into the position here, which is closer to the curb, to ensure your safety. Once you've got the bike into the new lane, everything's nice and safe, we'll come back to the middle of the lane and then continue our journey. Okay, we're now going to turn right, major to minor. So the instructor or the examiner would give you an instruction, and that would be take the next road on the right. If you get that instruction, you know you're making a right turn into the side road. The approach is exactly the same. So it's going to be OSMPSL, observation signal, manoeuvre into position, and once you're in position we're going to slow the bike down. Again, what we need to do on approach is use both brakes to slow the bike down, and this time I'm going to slow right down so that we've got the bike travelling at a very slow speed on approach, and it's a nice calm speed as we get into the final stages of the turn. As we approach here, our road position and signal confirms where we intend to go. On approach to this junction, you're going to find a lamppost in about this kind of area just here. So on approach, you're going to come onto both brakes, slow down with both brakes, and then when we get around where the lamppost is, most of the speed should be off, and then at that point we can come off the front brake. So we're just going to finish off now on the rear brake. And as we're moving in towards the junction, we need to think about a lifesaver. So anywhere between the lamppost and the start of the junction, we need to take a lifesaver over the right hand side. This would ensure there are no fast moving vehicles that have decided to come past and make an overtake. As we look forward, we should have completed the slowing down, release the brake if it's clear, and then as you look forward it's clear, we then commit ourselves into the right turn. Once we're in the new lane, cancel signal, and then once the bike's straight, then we can accelerate away. Again, as we're turning into the side road, keep your head up. We should be looking for any hazards in the new lane, and also we should be looking for any new speed limit, and if there's a new speed limit they'll be found on the left and the right hand side of the road. Sometimes they're just found on one side, but mostly they're found on both sides of the lane. If you're in this position here and we've taken a lifesaver and we've looked forward and a car appears from this side of the road, then we need to be able to stop the bike and stop in this position here. What we don't want to do is overshoot the junction, and what we don't want to do is stop too short, because that would allow the cars from here to come out in front of us, and if we overshoot then we're going to end up doing what we call a swan neck, and that would be bringing the bike around in that position. So the idea is to make the decision early that you're going to stop or go. If you're going to stop, we stop opposite the junction, and if we're going to go, we should be going at a nice enough speed to control the bike's position, so we end up coming about 2 feet away from the centre white line. By turning into that position, you'll end up nicely in the middle of the lane here, which will give you maximum view into the road. If you are coming too fast into the junction, the possibility is to cut the corner, because what most people do is they turn in too early because they're carrying too much speed. So that would mean that you'd come across in this direction here, and then there'd be a possibility of conflict with oncoming traffic. If you stop at the junction here, before we go, we need to carry out a lifesaver. Ensure that this traffic is not coming past us or trying to turn from behind us. Once we've carried out the lifesaver, then we look forward, we check into the road that we're riding into, and then we're going to ride into the road nice and slowly. Again, cancel signal in the new lane, and then accelerate away.